I'm Barry Rathner. I'm in Poland, and I will not talk too much because we only have 4 people online, and I don't get paid unless we get at least 10. Just kidding, just kidding. I don't get, I don't get paid if we have 10,000. So I will just schmooze, as they say, for a couple of moments, and giving people some time to get on. We can, since this topic is Homa psychotherapy, we can do a couple of the mantras that are central to Homa psychotherapy. For example, the morning Agnihotra mantra at sunrise. Suryaya swaha, Suryaya idam namama, Prajapataye swaha, Prajapataye idam namama. And at sunset, 2 words change. The first word and the third word. Instead of Suryaya, it's Agnaye. So how would that be? Agnaye swaha, Agnaye idam namama, Prajapataye swaha, Prajapataye idam namama. Now, for those of you on now, let me make a distinction between the simple Agnihotra we do and the Agnihotra that some of you in India may have heard that your grandparents did, or specifically your grandfather, because in the old days, women were either not allowed or not encouraged to do yajna, to do homa, to do Agnihotra. And that is one of the revolutionary aspects of this simple Agnihotra. For in the late 1960s, this simple Agnihotra was revealed to the world, and it is meant for everyone to do. Men, women, children, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Harijans, anyone who did it properly would get the benefit and give the benefit to the atmosphere. And if you needed a, shall we say, code word for this movement, you could say, heal the atmosphere, and the atmosphere will heal you. Let me take a quick look and see if there are any comments. I don't see any related to right now. So in a couple of minutes, I'll begin my prepared remarks. And I'll say this, though, now. I'm very happy to be speaking to, I would assume, are predominantly young Indian psychology students. And the reason I'm happy about that is, first of all, I used to be young. I remember it well. And many of those years I was actually in India doing PhD studies at University of Pune. And the situation that the planet is in now with regard to really 3 or 4 major issues, all of which I'm happy to say are addressed by Homa psychotherapy. I'll tell you what those 4 issues are in a moment, but the reason I say that they are addressed by it is Homa psychotherapy concentrates on the mind. And the mind is that part of all of us that thinks, feels, and wills. Wills being intention. Thinking, feeling, and willing. And if you think about it, or feel about it, that's pretty much encompasses everything. And the nice thing about psychology is it pretty much encompasses everything. So I feel free to address the 4 crises that, in my opinion, we all face now. Now, that's one interesting thing anyway. You can call anyone in any country now, someone you know, someone you don't know, and you can start a conversation with, are you safe? Are you well? Because the coronavirus has created a situation where we are all literally in the same boat. And that's, I guess you might say, the good news. The bad news is, in some respects, the boat is sinking. So coronavirus is one of the 4 major problems affecting us all. A second problem facing us all is climate change. Now, why am I bringing up climate change when we're speaking about Homa psychotherapy? Well, the core of Homa psychotherapy is Sunrise Sunset Agnihotra, and it is a tool which can help with coronavirus, which can help with climate change, which can help with discrimination, which is number 3, Black Life Matters, and can help with the terrible income variance on this planet between the rich and the poor, which also is related to climate change in a way and to discrimination. When Agnihotra was introduced to the West in 1972 by Sri Vasant Paranjape, the main word he spoke of was pollution. But it wasn't just industrial pollution, which was just beginning at that time. It was soil pollution, air pollution, water pollution, and he said at the time, the worst form of pollution, our thoughts, thought pollution. Have you ever walked in a room after 2 people had been having a verbal fight that you didn't know about? You can feel the vibes in the room. Have you ever entered a room where 2 people had just finished expressing love for each other? Well, even if you didn't know it, you would walk into the room, you would feel a kind of peace and serenity. There's an example of thought pollution in a good sense. So thoughts are things. We have to be careful about what we think because they are real. Not to mention, they often lead to actions, ultimately. Think long enough about eating a pizza, and sooner or later, you will end up eating a pizza. Trust me. Now, as I said in the beginning, I'm happy to be speaking to an audience of predominantly young Indian psychology students. Young because you guys are going to be around here longer than I. my generation has a responsibility to try to leave things, if not better than they were when we entered the planet, at least not much worse. And we aren't doing that great a job at the moment. Now, we used to say when we taught Agnihotra, and I've been teaching it for more than 40 years, that we were trying to save the planet. Save the planet. Now, I think a more workable way of putting that these days would be, okay, if millions and millions of people begin doing Agnihotra and continue doing it regularly, perhaps that will literally save the planet. Until we get to that point, it's pretty much upon us to save ourselves. I live at a beautiful, wonderful Ecovillege in southern Poland, and we do Agnihotra at sunrise and sunset. We do 5 hours a day of Om Trambakam Yajna. We do 24 hours of that same yajna on full moon and new moon. And I don't know if we're saving all of Poland, but we certainly have created an atmosphere here on these 4 hectares where people come and speak and act and feel as if they had entered some kind of nirvana. That's what the atmosphere is here. We have healed the atmosphere, and the atmosphere heals us and guests and visitors who come here. It's that simple. But don't believe me. I know I sound very believable, but believe what you experience, please. If what I'm saying is plausible, make arrangements to get Agnihotra materials so you can be your own Homa psychotherapist, either from the point of view of a therapist or the point of view as a patient or a client. And you can get those materials at agnihotra.pl, as in Poland, .org. Agnihotra Poland.pl. Or did I say that right? No. Agnihotra.pl. Forget the Poland. You might also wish to look at our website, ecovillagepoland.org. ecovillagepoland.org. I'll mention one more website, and that is www.homapsychotherapy.com. That's my website that speaks to some of what we're speaking about today. Okay, why am I happy that I'm speaking to Indians primarily? Well, we call our Ecovillege where spirituality meets ecology. Where spirituality meets ecology. Well, my years in India showed me that India is the epitome of a place that deals with spirituality and the material world. Why do I say that? Well, where else can you be stuck in traffic behind a big lorry or a 16-wheeler, as we call them in America, and be able to take darshan of Lord Ganesh on the bumper of the lorry in front of me? Nowhere else, I'm sure. In India, happens all the time. Well, it's interesting because India is in a position to do some things that other countries cannot do. You have an appreciation for Vedic culture. You have an appreciation for spirituality. And you're also much better on computers than people in Poland and probably the United States. So, I think you catch my drift. I want to read to you something to kind of set the tone of the importance of what we're going to talk about. This is a message that was given to Parvati Rosen-Bisberg, my neighbor on the Ecovillege. She started this place with her husband Yarek in 1995. And I'll read the message to you. And it comes from Aranya. And it's atypical of the types of messages that have been coming to Parvati on a subtle level in meditation for the past 25 years or so. This one was given on June 18th, and I'd like you to listen carefully, please, because it speaks primarily about the United States, but because of COVID and because of the types of leadership in certain countries, I think it's relevant to India as well. This is entitled Removing Seeds of Prejudice. Yes, yes, yes. Indeed are the times, these are the times we have foretold, although perhaps sooner rather than later. There has been an upsurge of crimes against humanity, including, though not limited to, unjust attacks on human beings of color. This has no place in the world today. The pitting of brother against brother, sister against sister is an unconscionable act of divisive politics in this case, and a stirring of the pot of racism and exploitation that cannot be contained. We are aware of the divisive nature of current political regimes in various countries, led no doubt by the great, in single quotes, united, in double quotes, states. So one can say by the supposedly great United States, or erstwhile. We urge all of you to remove any seeds of prejudice in your own hearts and minds. Make deliberate and careful inventory of your interior to make absolutely certain those seeds do not exist and thus do not take hold. The teachings of your elders and their elders can come in nicely packaged offerings, so do not be deceived. The proof of one's equanimity and equality is in their actions. Words are previews, actions are heard louder and clearer than one's words. We have seen, listen to this part especially carefully. We have seen the rise and fall of great nations. It is not impossible that the greatest nation in history can be brought to its knees, and that the civil liberties and civil rights of a people can make or break this country, USA. Be aware and beware. This is no easily surmounted obstacle to world peace. It runs deep and shall only survive it if it is uprooted as and where it grows. Prejudice is a disease that once rooted in one's inner soil, one's individual inner landscape, is difficult to remove. It takes absolute focus and steadfast effort to rise above it. But without releasing the roots of the disease, it cannot be truly eradicated. Blessings, Om. This was heard by Parvati on June 18. That's 3 weeks ago. Now, if getting a little political offends anyone, I could apologize, but I won't, because the times in which we live are affected by politics. Coronavirus is affected by politics. Governments give advice based on how it makes them look politically, in many cases, not all cases, certainly in my country, the United States. Perhaps also in the country in which I sit at the moment, Poland. India, you know, George Floyd was not Indian, he was American. But there are Muslims in India who have names as well. So that takes care of young, Indian, psychology. Well, that's obvious. We're talking about Homa psychotherapy. It's part of psychology. Students are open to learn. And, you know, Jesus said, don't spread pearls to swine. Well, students, almost by definition, are open to learn. Hence, pearls of wisdom can be spread to them, to you. Which actually is a major theme of mine too. There's only so much you can prove with psychological studies. There's only so much. But just like Corona, where the mantra has become, we don't know. We don't know if it's primarily affecting older people, now that it's starting to affect younger people. We don't know if it's safe for children to go back to school in 3 weeks. We don't know if it's safe to open the barbershops and the cinemas. Everything is we don't know. So, sorry to tell you, young people, but the world has changed. When I was growing up, we assumed that governments and older people knew more than we. Well, we can't assume anything these days. So that's why it is upon you to do studies. Do studies with Agnihotra. Do double-blind, controlled, peer-reviewed studies. Let us see if the study in Mysore, where young HIV-positive children who started doing Agnihotra had their numbers lowered, their viral numbers. Let us see if the studies done in Chile and in Russia, which I can send to you, support the preliminary results of great stress reduction by people who do regular sunrise, sunset Agnihotra. And if you want to do the ultimate experiment, go to that website I told you earlier, or if you're in India, you can buy Agnihotra supplies from homatherapy.org. Get your pyramid, get your cow dung. Ghee is everywhere in India, though it has to be pure cow's ghee, of course. Get your unbroken brown rice and learn the mantra and do it for 15 days. 15 days. Let's add that up. 10 minutes for sunrise, 10 minutes for sunset. That's 20 minutes a day. Times 15 days is, I think, 300 minutes. That's divided by 6 is 5 hours. A 5-hour investment over 15 days. I think that's correct. And you will know for yourself. You can see if you sleep differently. You can see if you dream differently. You can see if you are more full of love than you normally are. Because that's what happened to me. When in 1975, in a 4.5-hour group psychotherapy session, in my attempts to get out of the depression I was in at that time, and when the psychiatrist announced to the 22 people that anyone who wished to go into the next room with Rossford, the psychologist, and meditate, he or she was welcome to do that. And since I had been so depressed and so down as a result primarily of my addiction to marijuana at that time, and then coming off of it, I had nothing to lose. I went into the next room. We sat on the floor. We did Agnihotra. I walked back in the room, and I was a changed person. And 45 years later, I am a changed person. And I'm able to impart that to my patients and help them get out of their depressions, their drug addiction. And yes, when I share Agnihotra with them, often they don't need therapy anymore. I didn't. I went, I don't know, 42 years without needing therapy again. But someone who's good at math is going to say, well, if the guy's been doing Agnihotra, why did he need therapy after 42 years? Well, that leads to another important aspect of Homa psychotherapy. In the literature, you will see reference to the fivefold path of Vedas. Vedas being the ancient-most knowledge on the planet, Vedas being a source of science, not religion, and Vedas, which has the tools for us to not only survive the age in which we live, but in fact to thrive. And when you think about it, you don't hear a whole lot of people talking about thriving these days. So, the Vedas. This fivefold path, however, starts with the number 5. Agnihotra is the most important aspect of the fivefold path, but Agnihotra opens the door. Opening the door doesn't get us into our homes. We have to take more steps. And the other 4 steps of the fivefold path are Dan, Tapa, Karma, and Swadhyaya. Dan, sharing our assets in a spirit of humility. Tapa, self-discipline, done with the complete cooperation of intellect and mind. Karma, living our life in consonance with the law of we reap as we sow. And Swadhyaya, self-study or self-development, an effort to answer the question, who am I? Why am I here? What is my V-karma? The specific allotted task for me to make the progress I have the potential to make. So it's a package. It's a package deal. Someone wrote on the Agnihotra group this morning, actually, something to the effect that Agnihotra makes enlightenment easy. Well, I wrote back saying, well, if it were so easy, why haven't more of us done it already? And I suggested that he rephrase it to say Agnihotra makes enlightenment easier. It's a tool, but it's not easy. The fivefold path is just like the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in one important respect. Both programs have been said to be simple, but not easy. Simple, but not easy. As I went through the years of doing Agnihotra, whenever I had days when I was not feeling as happy as I might want to, or if I went through a 2 or 3 day period of such, I would start asking myself, which of the 5 aspects of Fivefold Path was I deficient in? And always I could come up with an answer. If I was feeling stress over monetary concerns, I was late making my electric bill payment, I didn't know if my next paycheck was going to be sufficient to pay for this and that. Well, that's one of the things that Don is meant to address. If I am doing Don, sharing my assets in a spirit of humility, I will become less worried about material things. And they say there's kind of a superphysical law or rule connected with that. If I give 50 rupees to someone, some deserving person, sooner or later, I will get back maybe 60 rupees. And when I lived in India in the 80s, 60 rupees was worth something. Now it's, I don't know, can you get a garam chai for 50 rupees? Maybe. But that's Don. Tapa. Tapa is sometimes fairly easy to diagnose. If I woke up this morning feeling like a beached whale, as they say, because I ate cold pizza at midnight, then it wouldn't be too hard to discern that maybe I need some food tapas. Maybe I should do a juice fast. Maybe I should not eat cold pizza at midnight. Whatever. Simple self-disciplines. And it's interesting, this tapa, and we use this in therapy a lot. If someone has a problem with anger, for example, it's not always so effective to say, well, just don't get angry, or when you do get angry, try to deep breathe, or walk out of the room, or whatever. May work sometimes. But if you do a different kind of self-discipline, a different kind of tapa, like a food discipline, for example, or an exercise discipline, pranayama is a very good tapa, by the way. That helps us go in through the back door. And we can control our anger by controlling our food, for example. Karma, step 4. We reap as we sow. The law of karma I find especially interesting these days. Why? Because there's so much disturbance in the world. One wonders how and why certain people seem to get away with their poor behavior. I'm thinking now of politicians especially. Well, the law of karma is inviolable. Sooner or later, we reap as we sow. The trick, though, is when the later is. And let's just say God's time may be different than our time. And why things happen is way beyond our intellectual prowess. And we may as well not waste energy worrying about the whys and just observe. And if we go back and think about that Orion message about the United States could be brought to its knees by the current behavior of its government, that's kind of a shocking statement. So we'll see. Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya, one might say, other than Agnihotra, is the most relevant of the 5 steps to Homa psychotherapy. Why? Because we're dealing with basic going within issues. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose on this planet? How can I be more happy? How can I get around the situation which most humanity faces? I'm happy on Monday, and then I'm not so happy on Tuesday. I'm happy on Wednesday morning, and I'm not so happy Wednesday afternoon. How do we get away from those ups and downs, ups and downs? Well, meditation, it is said, has as one of its purpose to avoid the highs and the lows and to create a more balanced way of living. And the 10 minutes that it takes to do sunrise and sunset Agnihotra are full of opportunities for concentration, leading to contemplation, leading to meditation. And just like most psychological concepts can really not be put into words, okay, you've got the pyramids or the lists of human potential. You've got many psychological tests that measure this and measure that. But just as there are subtle aspects to Agnihotra that would be difficult with current technology to prove, so it is with many aspects of psychology. But that needn't dissuade us from trying. Hence, again, I urge you to be open to doing psychological experimentation. There are many, many masters and even doctoral students in India, especially, who are doing studies of Agnihotra on various psychological parameters. Dr. Ulrich Burke, another of my neighbors here at the Ecovillege, spends 6 months a year lecturing at universities, visiting students, encouraging them to do studies, and he's scheduled to go back to India in October, Corona allowing, and this is an area that is fertile for experimentation. And it's such wonderful service because, just for a moment, let's talk about Homa organic farming, which is also, you could say, part of Homa psychotherapy. That's the great thing about psychotherapy. Anything to do with the human body is fair to speak about. You know, if you go into a mental hospital, one of the first things they do is they send you for a dental examination. And then they'll talk to you about your diet. And then the more obvious things, your drug addictions, your this, your that. So, Homa organic farming, when Vasant Paranjape wrote in 1980 or 81 a book called Homa Therapy, let's see. Yeah, or maybe it was Homa Organic Farming or Homa Therapy, Our Last Chance. Homa Therapy, Our Last Chance. I thought that the title was a bit over the top, a bit dramatic. Our Last Chance? Well, in 1980, perhaps I could have been excused for thinking that. In 2020, I don't think that anymore. I think Our Last Chance is quite spot on. Because even if you shop for organic food, can you always trust your supplier? Even if you shop for very healthy food, what about KARUNA? What about the people working in the shop? What about going to the shop? So, when Sri Vasant advised us to grow our own food through Homa organic farming, we don't have to worry about going to shops. We don't have to worry about the whether there are GMOs, genetically modified organisms, in our food. We don't. So another tool of Homa psychotherapy. At some point, I think we can open up for questions, but I'm not sure exactly how that's done. But we'll see. And again, you can always write to me at my email address is dr, like Dr. Dr. period Barry period Rathner, Rathner, @gmail.com. And that address is probably on my website too, homapsychotherapy.com. Now, the other reason I like speaking with those from India is because your culture speaks to some of the concepts that I've alluded to. There are extensive treatments, for example, of the problems of misery and suffering in major ancient Indian texts. The references that are most useful for this purpose are Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, and they talk about dukkha, pain and misery, klesa, afflictions, atman and namkara, self and ego, and such. Certainly kama, desires. We talk in Homa psychotherapy about the 6 crocodiles that are constantly snapping at our minds and bodies, trying to take us away from the happiness we may be experiencing. Greed, attachment, lust, fear, anger, pride. If I'm walking around thinking that I'm God's gift to mankind, kind of a prideful situation, that's going to be a problem at some point, because what goes up must go down. If, however, I can think of myself as a servant of higher power, then the fruits and the not so sweet fruits are not mine. I put them at the feet of my master. Anger, I never subscribe to those schools of psychology which think that anger is a healthy thing. If it were so healthy, why do they want you to get it out of you by scream therapy or such, or, facing your accuser in an angry fashion? It doesn't work. If you knew what happened to your body hormonally and otherwise when you were angry, you would just as soon cut your wrist. It would be probably karmically cleaner, because you wouldn't be hurting the other person. But don't cut your wrist either. What else? Attachment. That's a subtle one in a way, because in the world in which we live, it's kind of buy. Amazon. Well, one byproduct of Corona, where we're locked down, is we can't buy as much. And guess what? We find out we kind of enjoy the whole thing and don't need as much as we thought. Climate change, which we haven't talked too much about. Climate change is, as the expression goes, the big elephant in the room. that people don't like to talk about? Well, in my opinion, one of the good aspects of Corona is that whereas before Corona, people might have looked at climate change and said, oh, this is way too big for us to address. And we will never get the coal companies out of business. And we will never get people to drive less automobiles. Well, those in Delhi who can now see the Himalayas, there's probably 25-year-olds who've never seen them from Delhi, proves that yes, when humans change their behavior, nature comes back at least for a visit. So we can address Corona, though it's not easy. We can address climate change once maybe Corona has been addressed. And there's a strong connection, in my opinion, between tapa, self-discipline, and Corona. The United States is doing the rest of the world a great service at the moment by showing how not to address this pandemic. 10 minutes after the bars and the gyms were open, the whole population flocked to the bars and the gyms. Well, the only problem with bars is no one in the history of alcohol has ever socially distanced when they were drunk. No one. You get drunk, you want to hug people, right? Well, the United States has over, I believe, 3 million coronavirus cases, are projected to have 210,000 deaths by August. And they've shown us what a lack of discipline can do. What a lack of discipline can do. Now, I can relate because we have an interesting program that is part of Homa Psychotherapy. It's called the Homa Psychotherapy Drug and Alcohol De-Addiction Program. And this is something that can be done at Homa therapy centers and is a rather intense form of detox from drugs. And it employs such things as major changes of diet. If you're not a vegetarian and you come into this program, you have to become a vegetarian. If you're already a vegetarian, you go on a 100% raw food diet, complemented by often, say, 5-6 days a month of liquid fasts, complemented by keeping silence, sometimes for more than a day or two, complemented by physical activity, more than you're usually used to, and importantly, complemented by doing several hours a day of another fire that we do in addition to Agnihotra, that is the Om Trambakam fire, which, as I mentioned earlier, we do for 5 hours daily at the Ecovillege, Bhrugu, Aranya, where I live. And that fire is something that anyone who is doing Agnihotra can add to his or her repertoire. The mantra is very easy. Many of you listening probably know it because it's a very famous mantra. Om Trambakaya Jamahe Sugandhim Pushti Varadanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshi Amamritat Swaha. We say Swaha when we do that mantra with fire, and we add a drop or two of ghee after Swaha, and then we start it again. over and over. Agnihotra mantra you say only one time. Om Trambakam mantra you do as long as you do the fire. So for example, here we have, say, 5 people, each doing an hour each, or 7 people, each, some doing a half hour, some doing 1 hour, doing that mantra. And as I said earlier, 24 hours on full moon and new moon. And those of you in India have an opportunity to visit in Maharashtra, near Dhule, near Jalgaon, a place called Tapawan, which is an amazing Homa therapy center, where Om Trambakam Homa has been going on 24 hours a day, non-stop, for what will be in March 20 years. For 19 years and 4 months, this yajna has been going on non-stop. And should you have the opportunity to visit Tapawan, I would put that on my bucket list. Another very special place in India is what's called Goshala Center near Maheshwar in Madhya Pradesh. And that is a very special energy point on the banks of the Narmada River. One can experience and learn there as well. And it is maintained by Sri Vasant's son and grandson, Abhay Pranjape and Sarvajit Pranjape. Let's see what else we might add before we close. There are many case studies of the effects of Agnihotra on psychological parameters. I would urge you to go to homahealth.com, homahealth.com. And there are case studies of HIV patients, Down syndrome patients, schizophrenic patients, depressed patients, alcoholics, drug addicts. So many testimonials and case studies. Before I came to Poland in 2009, for 10 years I was a counselor at the prisons and jails of Southern California, primarily the Los Angeles area. And I tell that to you for a couple of reasons. First of all, at one particular prison, Chino Men's Institute, west of LA, I used to do Agnihotra with the prisoners, and then I would get reports the next time I would go there. I only went there like, an average of, say, 1.5 times a month. They would tell me that the nights that we did Sunset Agnihotra, the dormitories where they lived were much, much more peaceful and calm than on days when I wasn't there doing Agnihotra. The other nice thing about that is they had a herd of about 25 cows on the grounds of this prison. And guess what I had the inmates do for me? Collect cow dung. Yep. They collected cow dung for me. It's the least they could do to repay me for telling them good jokes. So if I ever finish my book on Homa psychotherapy, perhaps there'll be a couple pages about that experience. Okay. I didn't mention the kind of a core slogan of the Fivefold Path, and that is atmosphere, prana, mind. How does Agnihotra work? Agnihotra purifies the atmosphere. The atmosphere purifies prana, the life energy that pulsates in us and around us and connects us with the cosmos. And because prana and mind may be thought of as being like two sides of the same coin, if prana is purified, our minds are purified in that atmosphere. Are there other ways to purify prana? Yes, pranayama, which is wonderful to do while the fire is burning, by the way, Agnihotra. You can do pranayama and you will help your mind purification. Agnihotra does it automatically. Those of you who like to have challenges, the mountain climbers among you, or the ones of you who like to ride Indian buses, the way they were when I lived there in the 80s. Don't do Agnihotra, just do pranayama. It's not as efficient because you would have to do, in my opinion, hours and hours and hours of pranayama to compensate for what one 10-minute Agnihotra does. But again, don't believe me. Believe your experience. Try it and see what you experience. So I'm going to end this live video. I'm told that there's a chance that I may then on my screen be able to see some chats that you may have written. Let's see, maybe I can see them now. Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Agnihotra.pl in Europe. Hi, Parvati. Thank you, Rainer. Let's see. Dipankar Atreya writes, Sir, how we can aware young generations with this divine scientific process, Homa psychotherapy. The best teachers are examples. Be an example. Walk the talk. Be what you want the young generation to be. They're very smart. They're smarter than we. Trust me. They're born with more tools than we were. So, you practice what you preach. Or even don't preach. Just practice. And they will catch the drift, as we say. Himalaya Homa Healing says, this program is certainly worth doing even when you're not addicted. Well, guess what? All human beings are addicts. I've heard 2 people say that. Plus, I think Patanjali Yoga Sutras leans in that direction heavily. But Sri Vasant said that, and a brilliant New Age teacher named Carolyn Mace, whose surname is spelled M-Y-S-S, as in Sam, but it's pronounced Mace, not Miss. She says the same thing. All humans are addicts. So, if you're not addicted to drugs, you might be addicted to one of the 6 crocodiles, the attachment, the lust, the greed, the pride, and the cold pizza at midnight. Rahul Kumar Kaushal writes, how Homa psychotherapy relevant to prevent psychological problems arise due to pandemic COVID-19? Wonderful question. Wonderful question. This unprecedented situation in which we on the planet find ourselves, it's certainly unprecedented unless you are 102 years old or older. Because the last pandemic, I believe, was the Spanish flu in 1918. What's happening? In many countries, because people have been locked down, the parents are abusing their children, beating their children. The husbands are beating their wives. The alcoholism has increased. The obesity has increased. Beyonce has gained 25 or more kilos. How sad is that? So, Homa psychotherapy can prevent these problems because, as I've said, it addresses, with the fivefold path, self-discipline, for example. Okay, you're locked at home. You don't have to go to the office. You can sit around in your pajamas. You can eat more because you don't have to wear a belt. Well, that's where self-discipline is needed. Self-discipline is not easy. It's much, much easier when you are doing Agnihotra. So much so you will be shocked. Let's see. Thank you, Krupa, for your compliment, and Parvati. Ranjita Sabnis writes, I'm so glad to hear you. Your lecture made me curious to know more about Homa therapy. Thank you. You are welcome. And Parvati, who is a brilliant teacher of young people, in addition to a person who hears Orion, says, and don't lecture youth. Teach them in a way that lets them discover it. Wonderful advice. Again, be an example, give them options, tell them your experience, etc. How does Homa psychotherapy differ from Freud's psychotherapy? Well, as they say in the old country, oi. First of all, Freud's psychotherapy is not real centered on the here and now. You know, lay on a couch, talk about your mother, yada, yada, yada. Well, unless your mother is in the room, that's not real here and now oriented. Now, the therapy I was trained in, structural family therapy, from Salvador Minuchin and Jay Haley in Philadelphia, USA, is very here and now centered. The whole family's in the room. You try to get the mother to tell the son what she wants from him, and you try to get the son to tell his mother that he loves her. That is therapy. That's here and now centered therapy. So that's one way it differs from Freud's psychotherapy. The sex aspect of Freud you can deal with if you're dealing with kama, with lust, and with brahmacharya, for example. So that can help a person who's troubled by sex addiction, for example. In the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, there are many other 12-step programs. There's Cocaine Anonymous. There's Marijuana Anonymous. There's Sex Addicts Anonymous. So whatever your addiction, Agnihotra can help address it. Let's see if there are any other questions I've missed. Homatherapy.org, international portal with additional links in India. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. I think we're going to call this a wrap. I'm going to end the live video and try to remember to share it so that the recording will be available. I thank you all for your attention, and Om Shri.